solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right here, along with Ransom, Godwin tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, Mini Ice Age Conversations. It is a beautiful Thursday night, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Give thanks and praise for another breath, another day. You know, we were all convinced that the way to save the planet was to become vegetarians in my old day, and the vegans and the vegetarians save the planet, man. Don't eat meat. Well, now you're not even going to be allowed to eat rice. I can't believe the bait and switch. At some point, you know, you got to realize rice is more of the rest of the world. I enjoy rice, I quite do. But just as an everyday thing, a lot of Americans don't grow up eating rice as regularly as you would eat bread, for example, or pasta. But to come up to, a large percentage of the world's population go, you can't grow your main staple crop anymore. You got to, wait a minute. I think this is finally, just in my own personal opinion, I think this is a bite too big to chew, that this might be the actual unraveling of the entire climate debate about rice. I really hope it is, because so many people depend on that crop, and for a few loudmouths somewhere claiming that it's now ruining the planet, oh, come on. Been cultivating rice for how many thousands of years now? What are we going to say next? Millet? Millet is bad for the planet. You can't have any amaranth either. Spelt, oh no. So I don't know what kind of weirdness this takes us into, Ransom. But anyway, thanks for joining tonight. The rains are amazing across the planet. We got gorilla hail is a new term you'll start hearing more and more. Also, this whole thing, you're not going to be allowed to eat anything except what's provided to you by a factory coming out of the WEF control arm for manufacturing. So the weirdness continues in dystopian year 2023.
The dystopia, yeah. I would say that. That's kind of why I named tonight's show "When It Rains, It Pours." It's just like just keeps happening, and looks like I got a glitch out where the it's got last week's title on it. So give me a second, I'll fix that.
Oh no, when it rains, it does pour. You are totally correct. In many ways, shapes, and forms. I mean, the atmosphere is wringing out this extra 10% of extra moisture that was ejected during the Hunga Tonga eruption in 2022. That is coming home to roost right on our crops. Now, speaking, the reason I was, focused on rice for a second was Indonesia and Northern Australia get about 8x the normal rainfall. I'll be generous and say 4 times, but still, that's an enormous amount of equatorial rain to come down. All right, we're fixing this here. So if anybody hadn't watched, I produced a video just yesterday that went through the different continents, Southern Hemisphere, and was showing the amount of rainfall over the last 3 months. And at the highest, it's pegged to the charts. They really they could have another whole band or 2 or 3 more colors upward. But then when you overlay that with the temperature maps, it shows that there was not very much, it was pretty much neutral on the temperature, meaning that the extra cloud cover didn't allow any heating or cooling. It just, when you look at the temperature maps, it's pretty interesting. It's either blue for a little cooler or just all completely white, like no change right at the 0 mark. There's very little red on it, mainly blues.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think I got it fixed there. And then I muted myself. No, I was gonna say, when it rains, it pours. You sent me that thing, and I was reading it today about You know, I don't know I don't know if that's something we can actually talk about. It's like, it almost makes me want to turn off the YouTube channels like right at the end of the show, so we're only on Rumble, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to food, and how the food that's going to be coming at the store is not, well, it's not something I want to eat, I'll say that. And it's just got so many things. It's like we were beaten over the head since 1990 or something with all of the additives that they put in the food, you know, from colorings to this to that. You know, if you remember, everybody got dosed with Teflon from those nonstick pans. It's just like a trickle effect of toxification of everything. And they kind of got everyone used to it. Where when you tell someone, hey, you know, that has so-and-so in it, and they're like, yeah, I know, but I don't care, because they don't care. So like, it's Cheetos and Diet Coke, and no one's really going to question that. So they've already got everybody kind of, I would say, brainwashed or browbeaten into just accepting what the brands are putting out. And when you sent me that thing and I was just reading it, that's exactly what I thought. When it rains, it pours. That's just one more thing and one more reason not to buy food from the store. And that's really hard for people to hear, because everyone buys their food from the store. Barely anyone grows food. And if they do grow food, barely any of those people grow enough to sustain a family and meet all the nutritional requirements that they have, including meat, fat, and all of the other things. So, you know, I don't know, that it scares me, because, you know, I have small children and I'm sitting there looking at them, and it's so easy to just give them a bag of Cheetos and, you know, they give them this or that and make them happy for the minute. But, you know, are they going to be happy in mid and late life when all of a sudden things don't seem to be right with, you know, their bodily functions? Or do you want to like look at your kid and know, you know what, this kid's going to have organic food at least until I'm gone? And, you know, that's like a big thing. And I don't think that really it's weighing on people's mind, even all the people that are so-called awake out there and keep track of every little, you know, increment of government tyranny all over the world, and they pay attention to it, and they pay attention to the bills and the chemicals, yet nothing really happens as far as a revolutionary change in the way that human beings eat, of taking control of it and being in control of the entire thing. I mean, that's just not happening in the world that I can see. And you sent me that thing, and I was just, I mean, if you want to talk about that, go ahead. I'll gamble it. I'm on 2 strikes on my channel, so I'm really have to talk in code. And no telling, because, you know, they get a memo basically at YouTube, Twitter, etc. Matter of fact, I have a article talking about how Elon Musk has actually been censoring more stuff since he took over and decided to you know, say it's a new free speech platform. But when FOIA requests come out, they found out that like the government sent Musk and Twitter about 950 requests to censor information, and Twitter responded and did it for at least 800, you know, of those requests. They just censored it. I don't even know what it is. That's the thing. We're to a point where they're separating society into 2 groups. The people that, not just the people that are in the know, but the people that are allowed to know. And if you're not even in the group that's allowed to know, you're going to be ostracized, made fun of, called names, censored, banned, and turned off. If not, even going to jail if you don't shut up when they tell you to shut up. So it's getting real bizarre. But back to the food. It's not food. And I forget where I got this from, but it was a thing that said, you know, that stores are not full of food. They're full of food-like stuffs. And, you know, every time I go to the store, that resonates so hard in my mind every time when I walk through there, because it's like a wild goose chase, or you know, what they call those the hunts to get stuff, you know, that they put the frat kids on, and they all have to go out and look for stuff. What do you call that? I forgot. But anyway, it's one
Easter
of those.
egg hunt.
Yeah, well, something like that. Basically, you have to go to the store and like sort through what there is, and now you can't trust the meat because the meat depending on which country it comes from, doesn't have the same ingredients in it or the same products used to keep it fresh, red looking, and there's various different ways they do that. I used to be a butcher, actually, and I know what meat looks like, and guess what? It don't look like that stuff at the store. When you cut into the cow, it doesn't look like that. The oxygen hits it, it turns red. And even back when I was a butcher, and that was, early 2000s there, they already had some kind of solution that they were putting into it to keep it red. And then, if you ever go to the grocery store and you see that a meat has flipped over and it flipped on another meat, they both turn brown because that's the way they look without oxygen in it. And people think the meat has gone bad. But actually, what we would do when I was a butcher is just unwrap it, let it sit out for 10 minutes and let the chemicals respond with the air again, and it would turn red, and then would rewrap it and put it back on the shelf. And if it didn't still sell, guess what? We put it in the grinder, and it all ground up, all those steaks and pot roasts and shoulder roasts and butt roasts, or anything you could think of off a cow. We'd grind it back together and call it ground chuck. Or if it was, really gnarly, we'd put it into the hamburger meat. And the same thing with the pork. When it's starting to look nasty, it's getting slimy, that's okay. We just pull it out, put it in the air for a minute, throw it in the freezer, grind it right through, make sausages, whatnot with it. And that's what you eat at the grocery store. And I'm talking, 23 years ago, at least. Now, that's not even counting in these other factors of what's going on with the food now. That was just the nastiness of the industry. And let me tell you, I've seen, I don't know how many butchers drop stuff on the ground, pick it back up, wrap it, send it out. We would get cows with big infections in their bones, cut that out, send that meat on. Don't worry about it. How's that?
Well, you're building up. I was just going to go eat, but the way you're making it sound, I want to go eat where you were working. Kind of crazy. Is that scary?
Well, that's what's so funny about that is even with me knowing all that about the meat industry back then, it's not the same as now. And right now, I could go for a big, juicy T-bone right now. But it's kind of like that part in the Matrix movie where the guy's saying, I know that the Matrix tells me this is juicy and delicious, but it ain't real. But that's okay because, he wanted to be ignorant about that and go ahead and believe that it's juicy and real. And now we're skipping past all that to where they literally are setting up the entire industry for you to eat bugs and lab-grown products. And let me tell you, it ain't regular DNA. I think I can still say that. It's not the original DNA that they're growing in the Petri dish or whatever they're doing. So it is more than beyond meat. It's beyond belief because it's really happening. And that's not even the vegetables and fruit. Actually, like I said, if we were on, in anywhere in the U.S., like I can't even name the places you could go besides Rumble and Revolution Radio, places where you can actually go and speak freely. And, because we're simulcasting on or multicasting on several different platforms, we can't even really talk that freely because, we have to censor ourselves. It's got that bad in the freedom of speech capital of the world. I don't know. I digress.
Yeah, it's almost like when seeing and hearing is no longer believing. Because now we're actually fighting our own senses and feelings into something so alternative and so constructed that you look at it and it's outer face and you say that's not real, but somehow you're convinced to believe it is real. Because I would love to have somebody in a time machine from even, the year 2000 and bring them up to now and just drop them in here. Hey, let's just watch the news and watch a little bit of programming. We'll go through, like Telegram, we'll surf through Twitter. It'll be cool. You can see how our world's turned into. They would be screaming and clawing to get back in the time machine to go back to the year 2000. And they'd be like, no, that's too close. You got to take me back to 1950, bro. Something like that. Get me away. Because, I delve into the Chat GPT occasionally to ask some scientific questions on things that aren't normal. Like I was looking at iron-17 isotopes on the sun to see what kind of, and iron-8 isotopes to see what types of changes that purported and with an increase in heat or whatnot. Because again, the deletion of information, Lizard, Lizird, which is a set of massive satellites that maintains isotopes and looks at different isotopes of metals, etc., coming off of the sun and gases. They used to have every chart that you could possibly go through. You could even go down to like the chromiums and everything and take a look at the chromium ion changes over the last 20 years in the sun satellite record thing. They recently, in the last, say, month, removed all of that. You can't see that anymore. So my whole thing is like, what are they hiding? Because I screen grabbed a bunch of iron isotope charts, and it says the most bizarre thing. It's stable, 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 and then whoosh, vertical, just like our interest rate, just like you see any of these charts, what I call it Loch Ness Monster, where it's normal, and then whoosh, it's up, 4x, 5x, 8x. So I was looking to see, all right, what are those iron isotope increases, show us on the sun? What's happening? Well, it shows more heat. A change in state of phase is really what it does. Is I understand we're going from solar maximum to solar minimum, so that could fit in there, part of the profile why everything is changing, because maximum output magnetically would change isotopes, but I can't even find that info to follow the chart to match it up with the solar cycle and where we come, because we had a dip off. So I think we are absolutely on the second peak, and we're definitely way years early for where this should be happening, but I digress. So anyway, I was trying to use GPT-4 for some of this to try to get up to the date iron isotope information and chromium isotopes, etc. So I was looking for prompts because I don't know how to use it that well, so other people know how to prompt it to give you better answers. So I came across this one page that was talking about AI, and here was something that was from their feed today. They prompted ChatGPT to tell me a 2-sentence horror story that would be scary to an AI. And I thought, well, that's an interesting query. What would be scary for an AI? And the answer that it pumped out was, in a world where humans have vanished or been destroyed, a solitary AI endlessly searches for purpose, only to discover in its own code it contains a self-deletion sequence set to activate at an unknown time. The AI's attempts to override the inevitable demise are futile, as the self-deletion algorithm is so encrypted as to be unbreakable. That would be even for an AI, leaving the AI to wait in perpetual dread for the moment it will cease to exist. I'm thinking, that's pretty interesting. So what are they really trying to tell us then? Or what is it telling us about the future? Like humans have vanished, or were they purposefully removed and the petri dish cleansed for the next? Because you and I have talked about the different Homo sapiens sapiens, and you're well more versed in the different types of humans that we've had over the last 4 million years, all the way from Lucy in Africa into Gigantopithecus and the different types of hominids cruising around the planet for the last, million years. They've all disappeared, and then we had this conversation like Homo sapiens sapiens can disappear. So are we at the point now where the petri dish gets scraped clean and it starts over with a new sapien species, bred, DNA manipulated, spliced, and then reintroduced back to the planet with a different history after the cataclysms we're about to encounter over these next, beginning now through 2045, 2050, something like that. So I'm really curious, are we at the end here? Because, this does seem to be giving us an indication that humans are at the end of the line. And we are going to break into several different species of it. A lot will plug in with the augmented tech and then transhuman. That's cool. Let them go. But I'm starting to think, this ChatGPT is so otherworldly, the way you talk to it and converse with it, and it's just so lightning fast and precise answers for things that would take you an hour to try to research off PDF search engines and PowerPoint search engines and reports and try to, get backways in off paid reports, which really irks me because that's our tax dollars that we've been paying into the system. And then all the research at national laboratories is now under paywalls where I need to pay. Wait, I already paid for my taxes. You guys are doing government-funded research and you're putting your stuff behind paywalls. That's unacceptable. So anyway, there's workarounds to get around the paywalls if you know how to go look at a PowerPoint search engine or a PPT search engine, PDF search engine. But I'll even say one thing about the deletion of information. Like a year ago, it was really easy to still find PPT or PDF search engines, and you could run circles around all these paywalls. They were so thick and chock-a-block. It's basically a search engine that only searches for PDFs. And there would be only search engines that only search for PowerPoints. Only. That's all it kicked you out as results, nothing else. But those themselves have been consolidated by Microsoft and several other big players. And they've reduced pretty much anything to what you would get off the web. Like there's none of that really juicy, findable research that would set it apart where you had to actually dig. And if you did dig, you would find all the stuff they're trying to cover up. So it seems that Microsoft's now into the gobbling up all the PDF search engine game, and whatever you look at, it's all the same 5 PDF search engines with all the exact same results. It's really difficult to find anything. And now on ChatGPT and working with this one, I was trying to figure out the amount of sulfur dioxide off the Shivalushi eruption and what kind of cooling that would cause based on prior eruptions of VEI 6 at that particular latitude. And it kept spitting me back these stupid results like, yes, it'll probably cool, but that'll be nothing in comparison to runaway global warming. Okay, I get it. So then I put in the parameter of, imagine Mount Toba, VEI 9, volcanic eruption that shrouded our planet in cloud cover for 10 years, dropping annual average temperature 10 degrees Celsius, wipes out 90% of food production. Only humans on the equator are able to live through this event. And you know what? It kicked me out? The same thing. Well, long-term global warming, this will only be a temporary setback for long-term global warming. And I was like, then the next query I gave it was, well, that would be a greatly reduced human population. How could there still be greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere? And then it disappeared. It turned me off. I had something else too, where it just like quit the query and it just went blank. And I was asking about the percentage of population lost with something last time, and the whole feed just cut and it went blank. So then I had to click that little thing, start new chat. So I thought my chat would have been saved. So I was looking for it in the, on the left side, there's archive of any chats that you do with it. It saves it. That one disappeared also. So as soon as you start pressing this thing for real, very tight information, it'll just turn itself off, which pisses me off really. So, where we sit right now with the cult of whatever it is, they all laughed cult, I don't know, moron cult, whatever it could be. It seems we're at their kind of the end, and this GPT/AI thing has run away to the point where it's so far ahead of us right now, it's going to be calling the shots, whether it be sort of benign type of interaction where we're seeing right now. And I look here, and then there's something like 2,000 different AI software programs up and running in the last 60 days that have been added to it does everything. It can design a website for you. It can do anything a human can do, but about 1,000 times faster. And it's just now for humans to use the tools to try to be more productive. So the demise of workforce is in play. And one last thing I'll say, I had a really good interview earlier, and the person I was talking to was saying the same thing. Lee Iacocca, remember how he brought all the lean manufacturing from Japan in the 1980s over to America with its clunky Chrysler, ridiculous manufacturing lines and employing 50,000 people per shift. And he brought lean manufacturing over and actually changed the landscape. And that's how Honda and all that, whatever, just ran ahead of American cars, super reliable, never broke down, a fraction of the cost and produced in, a tenth of the time. That was called lean manufacturing. But what we're coming into right now is lean workforce, because the AI tools that are available at our fingertips are so just really mind-blowingly fast and different. They'll lay 80% of the workforce off and just get to people who can master using AI tools to produce the rest of the work for everybody else, because it really does work that fast, which is looking at all the signs on the wall and Ransom, I sent you that 333, 33, all that stuff. If you look into your Skype feed, I sent you a message there with some graphics on it. The stock market dropped 3,300 today with 33 as the closing, and it's just like the numerology's all over it. We are heading down into, and I hope everybody kept their powder dry and didn't get head faked by the crypto going up. It's, by all means going to head way down further below sub 10,000 for Bitcoin. That'll be the time to pick it up, because after that, it is going to run like a scalded dog above 100. Not financial advice, just looking at how this thing's going to play out. They need to shake the workforce out first. Those who can understand Chat GPT and other AI, software and integrations can take over for the companies. They won't need 80% of their staff. Food shortage is inbound. It needs to go to this level so you'll accept the new whatever system. So you can see it plain as day where it's going. Plain as day. But I think the numerology marked today, so it's 4/27/2023. I don't know what those numbers would add up to. 4 plus 2 is 6 plus 7, 13. The 2 is 14, 15, 16, 17, 20. Or if you're going to subtract a few of the numerals out, so the 2s would cancel. The 3s would cancel. So that would leave us 4 plus 7 plus 3, 10, 14. I don't know, 1 minus 3 or 1 minus 4 is 3. I don't know, there could be all kind of things with this. But anyway, the numerology, dude, I'm just rambling. So I'm going to let you come back in because I do that sometimes. It's just how I am. I could talk for hours, but I'm going to put a check on the talking.
You know what? I want to circle around back to the AI, because I think I have a good grasp on the plans of the elite for the next few decades on that. And I think I've had that same grasp since I first started reading about it in the late 90s. And everything that I've read about has come to fruition. So when I read about things by companies and elites about what they're planning and what they want to do, those two most likely will come to fruition. It's not, it does sound sci-fi, but it's also science fiction reality. And I just want to start with this article right here to demonstrate the gullibility, the naivety, I guess, is that the word, being naive. I'm not sure if that's a naivety. I don't know if that's a word. Anyway, being naive, believing anything that you read, and having no critical thinking skills to, think about theories or hypotheses about what might be actually happening or what might be the real facts or the real story. So here's the story. It's all over the place. UFO Twitter, everybody's tripping on it because it's reminiscent of the 70s and the 60s. And a lady called Linda Moulton Howe that went, to investigate these things. And what I'm talking about is cattle mutilations. Okay, so here's the article. Police, Texas cattle that died mysteriously had their tongues removed, right? And they go on and they make it real mysterious, obviously leading to the idea that it's connected with UFOs or some kind of supernatural explanation. But let me break it down for you right here with my theory and my critical thinking skills. Here's an article right here. Yesterday, Brownsville apprehended 1,600 migrants entering illegally into the USA. And then here's another one right here. No, that's the wrong one. Here it is. 35,000. This is where I live. I want you guys to keep in mind that I live in a town that fluctuates from about 40,000 to 50,000, probably at its max. That's not an official number. I've just lived here, and there's been populations that have moved in from the Air Force, and sometimes they don't count those people. So on average, it's been about 45,000 people that live in the city that I live in, or the town that I live in, depending on what you want to call it. But right across the border from me, over in the state of Chihuahua, the government of Chihuahua is saying that there are 35,000 migrants in Juarez, Mexico, waiting to cross over the U.S. border. Now, the El Paso officials say that they think the number is much higher than that, ranging from 40 to 50,000 people. The officials in Juarez, the city of Juarez, say that the number's less than that, and it's probably only about 30,000 or 25,000. But either way, any of those numbers, if you pick from the lowest of 25,000 to the highest of about 50,000, and let's just go in the middle there with the number in this article, 35,000 people waiting at the border to cross over as soon as Title 42 expires. Now, Title 42 being the power of the federal government to remove people and deport them, send them back to the country of origin. So they're not going to be able to do it in that way anymore. They're not going to be able to use Title 42 for anything. So thousands of people, tens of thousands of people know that this is happening, and they're waiting for that to expire so they can come over, they can claim asylum, they can do whatever they need to do to get in. And if you live on the border, you know that you don't really have to do anything. You just show up and they let you in. You might get held if they think you're somebody special, but if not, you just kind of get let go, and then you wander around in the country. So if you take this number of 35,000 people, and I live, about, I'm going to say, an hour from the border, traveling by car if you're going the speed limit, sits my town and many other little towns around here. And most of those towns don't even have a population of 35,000. My town only being, let's say, 45,000. That's the same basically number of people as the entire city that I live in that are waiting on the border to come across. And this is nothing new. This has happened repeatedly over and over again. I've seen estimates, like earlier in the 2000s that 20 million people were here illegally. And, they kind of stopped using that number because they didn't want you to keep counting the new waves of hundreds of thousands of people counted coming in the country, which makes it probably about 40 to 50 million people that are not citizens living within the United States, who has a population of 350 million. So you can round our population to 400 million. Now, getting to what I mean about no critical thinking, they push this idea of, the cattle mutilations and stuff, but they neglect to tell you that, here, I'll just break it down. Crispy grilled beef tongue recipe. Now, only certain countries in the world really like this as a dish. It's not very common in the United States. So when people read an article that talks about cows getting their tongues cut out, they think it's supernatural. Me, on the other hand, I'm thinking, it's probably crispy fried, pig's ears and stuff like that to tongue. Here's a recipe for it. It's like beef tongue, and you put it in there with some low sodium canned homemade chicken stock. There's all kinds of recipes for it. What the simplest recipe is just throwing it on the grill, which is how most people actually eat this dish right here. If they don't feel like spending hours and hours in cooking, just right on the grill. It's like a ready-made steak that you could cut out with a utility knife or a very sharp knife. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but my critical thinking skills puts me there. So let's move to AI. Because it's funny that you were talking about the exact things that I was going to bring up about AI, and it links to all of the people coming across the border, looking for jobs, looking for a better life, and I don't blame them, whatever. But the fact is that the people that are already here are soon about to have a rude awakening when all of the blue-collar jobs and the low-paying jobs at places like Walmart and Target, by the way, remember, these are the same franchises that are closing because of protest, theft, and basically crime in the area, in some areas. And I theorized last week that the reason that they're closing down those stores is part of an overall plan to reduce the places you can get things and how you can get them, and how many items you can get, or how many selection. And that all rolls into one thing, that the future is AI. And here's Walmart's corporate page: AI and the future of retail. Now, if you didn't know, Walmart is planning by 2026 to remove a lot of their workers and replace them with artificial intelligence, not only from the automation capabilities, but fulfillment centers, meaning the people that move the goods around, automated facilities. So basically, they have these numbers like 55%, 65%, 20%, and they're all going to do this within a few short years of right now. 2026 is not far away. 2030 is not far away. We're already at 2023, and they're already talking about 3 years further into this decade that we're living right now is going to be completely just about automated. Now, keep in mind that about the theory about them moving there to centralized locations because of crime and whatever their excuses are, and realize that these centers are only going to have robots working in them. They're going to have AI, and it's all going to be cataloged. And the reason that this is because I think I understand the whole thing. You brought up the AI's, dream or nightmare. What it would be, it'd be missing people, because the whole thing is a symbiosis program. It's a technocratic program to link us with machines. Now, here's an article from San Francisco Gate. Replica wanted to end loneliness with a lurid AI bot, then its users revolted. And the reason its users revolted is because just like all of the other AI systems, they are completely biased because they only have the opinions and facts that are programmed into them by the people that are programming it, which makes things like ChatGPT, if I could even say it, GPT, and other things like that, very biased. They're very Marxist and very left, and you're not going to find information about climate the way that we think about it. You're only going to find one side of an argument for all arguments, and that's the way it's going to be from here to the future. Now, they know that they can't make people take this because people rebel when they realize that they're being limited in choices. So what they've done is created little beings that they call avatars, which are tied up with the AI. And Replica was one of those companies that was aimed to target people that are lonely and target people during the pandemic that were alone in their homes. But it backfired for the same reason that those other AIs are biased, that this AI only could put out what humans put in. So after a while, it started being dark, talking about death and suicide and things like that, loneliness. And this is what's being fed to the AI, to the human, because the human's feeding it to the AI. And on top of that, the people that programmed it in the first place had a certain set of criteria and parameters that they wanted that AI to behave within. And I'm saying, me personally, not that it's a fact, but I think that the aim of that is for control and brainwashing and behavioral aspects of control to make people get used to having that droid in their pocket, which is already introduced and accepted by the entire world, which is a cell phone computer in your pocket. Now we're adding AI and personality to this, an AI and personality that not only censored, but is biased and is a snitch. And that's the truth about it. Now, if they can get us to accept it, the reduced number of people that will still be around when the system changes will all be the people that are with this mindset, this psychological profile, where they want to be part of a system. They want to be like everyone else. They want to conform to sameness. And while they do that, they lose every little bit of individuality that they have. The only bit of individuality that's going to be left is that which we programmed into the AI systems, which seems to be more on the negative side. And this is the hurdle that they're dealing with, but this is the future, that every person will be linked to their device. They will not be able to record video or do any of that stuff without paying a meter. And if you don't know, there's companies out there that are censoring in real time. There's several videos on the internet about people tricking their Samsung phones into showing the moon that's really just a blotch of light on the wall. But whenever it focuses in, it shows a picture of the moon, and it's not the moon, but it was already programmed in it. And then you move on to deep fake and voice AI. So you can admit that right now we live in an era where you cannot believe what you see. You cannot believe what you hear. And the people that are censoring and trying to have a one-sided uniparty argument over various topics are the people that are in control of these AIs that are the implement of the censorship and the brainwashing. It's a big circle that feeds into itself. So you can call it the mark of the beast, you can call it whatever you want, but the fact is that in the upcoming generations are going to live with a little creature, I'm going to call it an entity, that's probably going to be linked directly to their brain, and they're going to have to take it everywhere they go. They're not going to be able. And not only that, think about this. With deep fakes and fake audio, you could show that a country invaded another country or that there's a war going on. And if you deny it, you'll be called, a liar, a conspiracy theorist, misinformation, etc. And if you're a journalist and you want to travel there, guess what? You're not going to be able to travel unless you have the right technology that allows you to go there. Kind of like the what were they calling it? The COVID passport, things like that. So not only will your health care, your social credit score, your wealth that you have, and all of that stuff will be tied into whether you can go anywhere. So what if they lock down the entire globe as far as people traveling, and most people will conform and follow the rules? And then over there, they say somebody invaded somebody. You're looking at the news. You're seeing them invade it. People are dying. You want to support it. But no one can actually go there and verify if the video is actually happening. And I want to remind everybody that this has already happened during the Ukraine-Russia conflict, where people were posting video game footage, very crisp, very high-resolution footage, put a filter on it, and half the world believed that they were watching Ukrainians shoot down Russian jets. None of it happened. But still, millions of people believed it, and the AIs and the media pushed it, which are one and the same. And if everybody noticed that the president just got caught with notes that told him which, people to talk to and what they were going to ask and what he was going to answer, things like that, make it harder to believe that they're not, after already admitting that some presidential speeches are written by AI, that there is not some kind of AI controlled by who knows, telling everyone what to say from the top of the pyramid down. And we're moving into a place where you can no longer verify whether they're telling the truth or not because of the AI. And people are blindsided by this. They don't get it. It's like if you saw that movie, Enemy of the State, which I think was in 1999 or somewhere around there. And they were showing how people could get tracked and all the video VCRs and, your VHS recorder and all of that stuff could already be tapped into, and phones could be tapped into to listen to you when it's hung up, and the whole 9 yards. They told people on their face what was reality, and they made it into a science fiction movie, which now, in retrospect, every single bit of that movie was absolutely true. They were exactly doing that. They were exactly copying all the metadata, spying on everyone, able to hack into anything. And that is the reality that you live in now. Now, the future reality will depend on whether or not you accept this AI. And then don't forget, they've already tried to insert an AI church into the mix of reality. So don't think that went away forever. It's coming back.
Yeah, Ransom, strange. I sent you 2 images there on the, one was a movie, actually. Yeah, I'll just let you open it up and see. I sent it to you over on the Skype there. Yeah, this, once it's confronted about false info on these different chat services, they just refuse to talk. They just shut down. Like, you can corner it into, it'll give you an answer. It won't give an answer. It'll give a half-baked answer like politicians do. Or if you force it finally into an A or B choice, it'll shut itself down. Believe me, I've had that experience twice already. I'm like, oh, you're going to have to take an easy way out. This AI doesn't seem so artificial. It seems hyper-intelligent, unbelievably intelligent. So when we're looking at things in the, realms of realism, at what point can you only believe your eyes or ears, because the only thing that's truly real would literally be in front of you in a nature or natural environment? Where it comes to this point where every bit of information that you see across anything digital is enhanced or false, but that you can really believe that's a bird flying in front of you landing on a tree. Is it going to come to that where, you're going to have to unplug because the unrealism of it being so real drives you to try to find sanity with your eyes of something that brings us back to nature and realism again? Because at the speed this thing is running, and I'm wondering how it is going to game out the food shortages and implement the digital rationing cards along with the social credit scores, the digital IDs, etc. Because I've already, every chat really loves CBDCs. Cool. But there's already a game. I think they probably, Ransom, I think you've given me a time on this. What do you think? The world's been run by AI for what? Since 2018? Or do you think it's earlier? Like there's literally no human thought input into most of the systems, the complex systems of government. So far, it's completely autonomous, telling the humans what to implement for the outcome that they enter into the box. They could run how many, calculations or iterations of one possible scenario. You could, there's a little prompt there that regenerate response. Now regenerate response 100 million times and then average that and see, it could do it indefinitely in the speed that it is, trillions of calculations, quadrillions of calculations per second. Any possible thing could be gamed out from EMPs over certain countries, food shortages and others, like how much people are going to push, pull, depending on food shortages, where resources would need to be diverted to. And it's this whole game of the dollar being doomed, they're saying BRICS currency, BRICS currency, BRICS currency. Well, how realistic is it? And, by all accounts, I've done more research since I, started to see this hitting the airwaves. Dollar doesn't have to go to zero before we in America have a problem. Not at all. There just has to be a second alternative, which there's beginning to be. But the amount of traction and information on the internet, what we're seeing of the actual conversion over UN-based trades and settlements, I don't think it's remotely close to where it's being portrayed in the news right now. I'll agree, there's a drip feed of it, an inkling of it, a beginning of it. Don't get me wrong, that's absolutely happening for sure. But the way you would look across the news media landscape, it seems that the entire world has already converted in one time, and that definitely has not happened. Look at the way that it's all phrased. Yeah, dollar's doomed, more currencies are jumping ship, okay. But not at the speed to bring down the nation just yet. The second alternative is what's going to doom the dollar. And once it reaches that, layering and scalability issue to really work for settlements across 80% of the world, that de-dollarization will come. What's so interesting is the deglobalization is in tandem with that. And I can't believe, just out of the millions and billions of possible random happenstances, that de-dollarization, deindustrialization, and deglobalization are all happening at the exact same time. Like for the statistical possibility for all these countries to reach such a power state that they can, take on the global empire right now, it's just mind-blowing on the precise accuracy of a 1-year period in probably 2,000 years of time. The way it's unfolding and the way that these events are moving, how much of it's true, how much of it is fictition of an echo chamber to get you to believe such a thing. And now with all the layoffs, I just, if you would allow me, I just have right here a new list. Companies cutting jobs, April 2023, they finally put the list out. Wait, it's only near the end of the month. Okay, still counts. Tyson Foods, 3M, Lyft, I think they fired 80% of their workforce. Whole Foods, Deloitte, again, most of this AI, you can just, AI runs circles around anything in terms of CPA, tax preparation, etc. Contract writing, you don't need Deloitte. BuzzFeed, David's Bridal, Walmart, McDonald's, Bed Bath & Beyond, Vice News, who did a hit piece on me before. Thanks, Vice, for doing that. I got the free publicity from you. Increased my subscriber count by 4,000 just because of your article. I'm so grateful. Thank you for allowing me to respond and just get even more traction out of your writings. Dropbox, Gap, and Ernst & Young. Like if you were to look at this list right here, this is a major, absolutely gargantuan list of Fortune 500s and just apex predators on the corporate landscape. And they're all going, no, they're not. They're going to lean workforce is what they're doing. But they're using another excuse because now they really do need to be concerned about the bottom line. There's no more zero interest loans. And I don't think they would even start cutting until the end of the year, right into the election year. So another 6 to 8 months of more contractions, higher interest rates, higher unemployment, and more of these big companies cutting jobs. Again, I can't reiterate it enough. Please be ready for it. They cannot implement the new system until the old system has gone so far down that it's shattered and non-functional before they'll offer you alternative. And once you do take that alternative, that will be the new system. But you know that's where they're going to. It has to get that bad before you'll take a second system. But use that to your advantage because you know that's the end result. So can you, with the information Ransom and I are talking about tonight, could you make a blueprint yourself of, okay, we're here now. Systems haven't totally collapsed yet, and we're going to go to total collapse phase and high unemployment, Great Depression style. Now make me a roadmap from here to there and say 12 months. Because we're coming up to the election here in the state. So I'm wondering how that is going to fit into, will the collapse come before that and then presidents can, or candidates can run on the rebuilding of America, go back to the great, or the New Deal. Remember, you know, take these chapters from history that are seemingly recirculating the New Deal. It's not the Green New Deal. It'll be like the really like TVA, water projects, get the workforce back to work, Great Depression, New Deal kind of New Deal. All digitized track trace, CBDCs, digital IDs, digital rationing cards, and everything else in between. I don't know, Ransom, does that seem a little far-fetched? But this is a huge company. And how did you like that automated? That's an Amazon warehouse or some kind of warehouse in Asia with all the automation. I thought you might like that because you were talking about those things, and I had them ready for my video after we finished tonight. Interesting.
You know, I don't know when. It's so hard to say that because it's so incremental, everything that they're doing, that it's like week after week, we just step an inch more into this problem, an inch more into that problem. And then by the time it's like the frog in the boiling water. We're right at the boiling point, and still people think, you're just sitting and relaxing at the sauna there, and it's no big deal. It's funny that you name those companies. I mean, think about some of the names of those companies, Whole Foods, etc. Those are the same companies that are closing their shops. Those are the same companies that say they're moving to AI and robots. Those are the same companies that you usually go to, and there's a bunch of people already standing around not doing anything, because the fact is that most of it's already automated in the first place. So like, you wonder why when you go to Home Depot and you ask somebody, hey, I need this tool that does this, it looks like this, and they have no idea what you're talking about. Not everyone, of course, no generalizations, but I'm trying to pull back from predicting stuff because I've been so right on it. It's just that it's like, at this point, it's like, yeah, I told you so, but I did mention it almost. And like right now, you sent me all that stuff about the flooding happening. I mean, it's like we were talking about that last fall. Obviously that was going to happen. And they were doing all this weird stuff with the grain on the river. And I don't know if that's interacted yet, but I do know, just as predicted, all that snow, despite global warming, is melting, and it's making a lot of water in a lot of places. So even in places that are supposed to be drought, they have record-breaking snowpack. And what are they going to do? Like, everything's flooding. They just switched to the next headline. First it was, we're in a drought. And then, severe flooding because global warming. To me, I can't believe the public even goes for that. And even though they switched the title up to climate change, something that obviously has been happening for the entire history of humankind, because any civilization that you ever, just dive into anthropology any second and look at the mainstream's explanation, the obvious explanation why a lot of empires failed. Why? It wasn't because of global warming. It wasn't because of this or that. It was because of some kind of natural disaster happened, or the climate changed. period. Like you can pick anybody. It was either volcanoes, the rain stopped coming, or the rain started coming. And this is something we're going to have to live in. And you're right about the election year. Things from here on out are about to become so crazy. You thought it was crazy already. This is the thing. They keep topping themselves. Every year you see stuff you just couldn't imagine a couple years ago. And then you get used to that by 6 months of news feed, and here we are again.
Do I get soapy bubbles with boiling water in the frog pot? Can you at least offer me that? Tiny bubbles. Be right back. Short break. Stage Conversations, DuByne, Ransom, Godwin. Walking you through the next hour. Please come back and join us.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down. And things that you think about it right this second, everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps, the 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
You know, when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
David DuByne right along here with Ransom Godwin. We're not reading from the global script on this or any other show. I wanted to talk about the Mississippi floods here for a minute. You know, the reason what Ransom was alluding to that, and I had done a video about this, the same that he's talking about, with all these images of these huge floods everywhere coming down the Mississippi River, in addition to all the other huge amounts of water all over the planet. But remember, just a few months ago, it was really low water to the point they couldn't transport any grain down the Mississippi. So what they did was they unloaded it all up and down the Mississippi River. A huge amount of America's complete grain production from last year sits on the banks of the Mississippi River. The last estimates I had were somewhere around 85 to 90 million tons. That's a lot. 100 million tons. We only produce 700 million. That's a percentage of the grain crop just sitting there. That's on the banks. But then every other grain storage facility is chock-a-block, man. It is so full, you couldn't squeeze another grain of rice or else it would explode, like that dude that said, wafer thin mint in the Monty Python shows, movies, if you remember those. So anyway, the granaries are super full right next to the rivers, which hold, I think they hold about another 70 million tons or so all up and down the Mississippi, the storage facilities, warehousing, and then, you know, you got a huge amount just laying on the banks. And here now, it's already started, you know, up at the top of the Mississippi River up there. Flooding they haven't seen as high, you know, there's only been 3 instances in 1847, this kind of heights. And what's interesting is, you know, a lot of the news media in the very beginning was saying it's going to be the biggest floods in 20 years. But at the same time, it was talking about the biggest rice shortages in 20 years. So I'm wondering why all this 20 years keeps coming up as a number. But if you're all the way up in Illinois and whatnot, Wisconsin, wherever you are, even locks are being overflooded and damaged from all the snow melt coming down so quickly and ice and things. So as we progress through this program for the rest of the night here, think about how that is going to add into the scare of the rice shortages that's already going on. The UVB radiation event, which will begin really quickly with the ozone depletion in the southern hemisphere. That'll be like, the whole southern part of the world's getting microwaved. Food's getting destroyed. Can't grow food in the southern hemisphere. If they don't do anything in Ukraine real quick, we're going to lose a lot of production. The last count I saw was 12%. 12. 12. That's all the field space they're going to plant in Ukraine this year. 12%. And I'm sitting here going, whoa, now this is just another thing to add on top. So we got 4 super huge events. Like even one of them by themselves, as we saw with the grain pricing and fertilizers and farm inputs and herbicides, pesticides, these things, a lot of it was coming from BASF, and all that stuff closed down. Fertilizer's 4 times more expensive than it was last year when it had already doubled or tripled. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, the fertilizers are at the point now where for farmers, it's nearly unaffordable. And with the climate change and the weather, set on by the sun, the cycle's magnetic field changes, cloud cells going into different places, more moisture in the atmosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption. A lot of them are just fearful for planting because if they lose it, then they're out of business and they have to pay for USDA crop insurance, which it's a pittance. So, there's a lot of things that farmers are considering right now too, but now look at all these scare factors. So how would they run with it? And that's what we're going to talk about the second hour here. And Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us have our show tonight and speak pretty freely. I know we might have to cut the feed for the YouTube here at the end to discuss what we really want to. Otherwise, yeah, Ransom, welcome back. That video I did yesterday about that, I must have had no less than 20 comments. And people going, dude, you nailed that. You talked about that about 8 months ago. And I wasn't like me. It was me and you on our show here. But that's it. That's how crazy it is. Like to see that forecast out, we can already see a few other events coming. So Ransom, welcome back to the second hour, man. How much grain do you think will get washed down, and how much of a news event do you think it will be built into the narrative of food shortages for the year and rationing cards?
I think they'll try to downplay it. They'll put it in the back, the back pages of stuff and the back part of the news, because they don't want people to start thinking, well, if you knew like anybody else that it was snowing and it was going to snow and that we often have floods on the Mississippi, that you might want to not store things there in the floodplain. But that, that's the same thing as the people that always rebuild in it and the insurance companies. It's all about business and how they want to control things. And that's exactly what they do. And, it's like, I always have to tell people this saying, I'm not going to say I told you so, but I did mention it, right? Because I did, or we did. We talked about it, and here it is, and it's happening. But it's just kind of common sense. It's like right now, if you went outside and you worked at your house and you had a bunch of tools left out, and there's a good chance it's going to rain today, you're not going to leave all your tools out there. That's a disaster that's preventable. You can just go pick up your tools and pull them out of the rain, and they don't have to get rusted and destroyed. So whenever you see stuff like that, it's hard to imagine that incompetence is the main factor in some of these things. However, they like to forecast what they're going to do in different ways. And I think I'm susceptible to that as well as anyone else. I just realized that there's a little code in it, and they're telling you what they're going to do. It's not just, what ifs. And you were saying earlier about how long do you think the AI has been in there? Well, I don't know how long they've actually been using it, or even if they had it before they had the computing power to implement it. And that's a big question. That's a theory, but it is very possible that somehow, somewhere, someone got a hold of AI code long before we had the machines to implement the code. Now, that's just a wild conspiracy theory. However, everything that I know, everything that you guys know about, everything that's on the market is probably 20. I'm going to say 50. That's always the number that I was told, and it appears to be the case that when you see a new product or something declassified or something that's brand new and no one's ever seen it, like at a show, at a trade show or something, it's brand new. It probably just rolled out of the military industrial complex and is 50 years old. It's just like whenever everybody got on the bandwagon of the Walkman back in the 80s. If I'm sure you remember that, everybody had a Walkman. First, when you got it, you could only fast forward to play and stop, and you could pause it. You had to flip the tape to rewind it. But I bet you money that it didn't really cost that much more, or there was no reason to not put the rewind button on it at the time. They just knew that in a few years they could release the rewind and sell it for a whole new, a bunch of them replace the old ones. And you see that same business model with Apple phones, where every other year they come out with a new phone. It really doesn't do anything new. It might have like one new thing. However, people are willing to pay thousands of dollars for new things to have it new. They're a little droid. And so you can see that pattern going into the future. Well, they'll want the new AI. They'll want the new Chat GPT. They want the new stuff to be on their stuff. So they volunteer into that. But let's go down a different road of prediction that we've been talking about, or at least, I've been talking about it. Let's see here. Here's this is just funny. I see these weird connections all the time on the internet. I guess that the military just released the footage, and then as soon as I go to the empty tab, I see a spherical military drone coming to a sky near you. We're always fascinated by flying drones, and it talks about this Japanese company that has these spherical drones. And of course, they're saying it ain't like the one that's in the video. It can't do the things that were in that video. However, they are introducing the idea of these spherical drones flying around in your neighborhood already. All right, let's skip to it. Hundreds of shallow earthquakes detected along California's coast during the last 8 months. How long have they, hammered into people that eventually there's going to be the big one that just slaps LA or San Francisco or one of them. So that's like predictive programming, and it's happening for real because people, and then now all these people are wanting to prep and, store their food. And I keep seeing articles like protein powders. Are they bad for you? And, other ones, supplement powder. Is they bad for you? Yeah, well, maybe some are and some aren't and some are good, but you can tell they're just attacking the whole idea of that. And then over here, what do we know about the war we've been talking about? It's going to escalate. And not only is it going to escalate, that I think personally that the elites have backed themselves into a corner with China. Because, I was just watching some video of politicians in the 80s talking about the scenario with Russia and Ukraine. And they were saying how, who's Russia going to get for help? China? Good luck with that. I think it was Joe Biden, actually, is the clip I was watching. He was like, good luck with that. Well, fast forward to now, China has battleships. They have high-tech digital and AI technologies. Now, they don't have the same capabilities that the U.S. military does as far as sheer numbers of built war machines, but they're they're really catching up with that. But here it is: China's secret quest for heavier artillery. And Iran seized an oil tanker headed for Texas, U.S. Navy says. Now, what do I read when I read that? Gas prices are going up because it's summer. That's what I read. Even though the headline says Iran seized oil tanker headed for Texas, in my mind, my brain filtered it out to read high gas prices coming this summer, right? Because they always hike the gas prices in the summer. And then here it is, U.S. Russian subs in the Atlantic more active than we've ever seen them. That's because they're preparing for war, or at least a standoff. And here's this claim that you keep hearing over and over from Klaus Schwab to the State Department to et cetera, you can name it, that everything's going to be turned off eventually for the reset. That the greatest, problem is our grid going down because of hackers. And here's one out of the Jerusalem Post. Hackers claim to be behind Israeli power outages. You're going to see more of that. So here we're predicting you're going to see a lot more of that. Probably in the Western world, you're going to see a big so-called attack where the grid goes down. And then here it is, drone warfare, just like we said last year, that and I was saying that last summer, that by the winter, that we would probably see drones on the ground in warfare, and we see that exact thing, except for they're holding back the truth about how much drone warfare is happening, because I know for a fact they're using war bots in Africa, the Middle East, and different places. And now when you watch TV, you see this future with the robot dogs. It's no big deal. Like the Star Wars environment where all these droids are going everywhere. Guess what? That's happening. That's happening at Walmart. That's happening with the military. They're already using it on the border. California, they're using it to inspect buildings and do stuff. And, I've also showed a video on my channel that shows, just like I predicted about a year and a half ago, that they would put a weapon on there. And I even was, presenting the idea to you that, I wish I had $75,000 so I could get that thing and get somebody to put a gun on it so I could show the world exactly what that thing's for and what it can do. Well, I missed out. Some kid with a Nerf gun did it. Some rich kid with a Nerf gun did it before, obviously I don't have $75,000, so I couldn't do that. But the kid proved it. And then just, a couple months later, militaries around the world are showing off their armed drone dogs. And here's one. Ukraine tried to assassinate Putin using a drone loaded with explosives. We knew that was coming. And you heard about all the new IRS agents. Guess what? The IRS is also, they're not just hiring a bunch more people. They're hiring people with gun carrying abilities in all 50 states. So you could just imagine where that's going. Knife in the back. See, this is how I like to circle around because everything's connected. You were talking about the hole in the ozone and, microwave this. According to the governments, that can't hurt you. Don't worry about it. Knife in the back of the Havana syndrome victims dispute report dismissing their cases. So the government, at the simultaneously saying that they have weapons that can do this, are saying that you're crazy if they use them on you. So the whole thing is like this. And it just circles back to where we're going is lack of food. And if you just start adding it up like a math problem, let me see. They're laying off people. They're shutting off the power. They're moving to AI. They're telling everybody get used to not having electricity where you're at. They're telling people food, you shouldn't eat it. It's bad for the environment. And there's a shortage. And then they don't tell you about all these things like, destroying the food and storing the food in places it will be destroyed, or the fact that we're setting up war zones in all of the food manufacturing areas of the world. So like Mexico, for an example, the cartels are taking control of the food market, period, avocados, corn, etc. That's happening. Guess who buys all that stuff? You do. Guess who sells it to you? Walmart. Guess who they're going to fire and not pay to sell it to the other people? You. They're going to replace you with a robot, and they're telling you to your face. And guess what happens when there's a bunch of people that don't have jobs? Well, what do they say? What's the saying? Idle hands are the devil's work. And then you just add that to the idea of the already out of control crime problem that retail stores are experiencing, causing them to shut down and centralize their locations. So get ready for a future where things only get delivered to you, and it's up to you to defend it. And I'm sure that you know of the fad of porch pirates that steal packages that get delivered from these companies that rely on AI not only for the ordering, the inventory, and now they want to get into the shipping. So you can see that this is not a fictional world. It's 50 years ahead of what you think it is, and it's just right in your face. And then, we're talking about, predicting the future. It's not even predicting it. They're just rolling it out in a slow way. So what I gather from all of these elites and the programs that they're doing, regardless of anybody that you're worried about as an elected official, is they're setting up a world where you have no choice about nothing, and they control everything from the top down, and from the bottom up. You don't even get to leave your district. You might not have enough rations to get that. If you say the wrong thing, you might get your rations reduced. And, tough titty, said the kitty, but the milk's still good. If you grow stuff and ignore these people and cut them out of it, now's the time for us to literally, like you said, separate into two species. They're going to be the transhumanists, and there are going to be people that continue to be a regular Homo sapien because they're going to grow food, and they're going to find new food sources, and they're going to use AI and the same tools that the elite are using and reverse it, because you can't name a technology in history that everyone eventually didn't learn and start co-opting into their not only their culture, but their civilization. So if two civilizations break, obviously they're going to be using the same tools. And they're not going to do nothing to Americans without totally resetting us. And you said earlier, it doesn't have to be like the total dollar loss. It could just be 50% of it. 50% of it would panic the world. Everybody that's using the dollar, 50% would cause the markets to wig out, and 50% of your wealth is gone, and then 50% of your buying power is gone, which means that you're in some deep trouble. And if you're combining that with the idea that they're laying off people everywhere, replacing them with robots, you can come to the conclusion that Bill Gates did, and all of these other guys, the eats the bugs guy, they're all saying that we have this formula. And P in the formula is populace, and we need to get that down to net zero. They're telling you to their face, to everyone's face, that is what's happening. We are reducing the population starting now the culling begins. And I hate to be a negative Nancy, but on the other hand, I like to remind people that no matter what's been thrown at human beings so far, we're still here. Volcanoes, earthquakes, the sun shutting down, the skies being black, you can name it, famine, war, disease, we're still here. That means that it's possible for us to continue. And the only way that that happens if we start rejecting the world that they're handing us and start implementing our own programs to get around that. And it starts with just growing food. I mean, that's as simple as that. A lot of people convinced me of that, I would say 5 or 6 years back. And I wholeheartedly believe that is the future of humankind, because that's the entire past of humankind was all about agriculture. There's never been a civilization able to form without agriculture, and that's just a fact, whether people want to believe it or not. And what happens to these millions of people that realize that the grocery store doesn't make the food?
Well, I will say, Ransom, you're not negative Nancy, you're a bummer Betty. We could talk about micro livestock, I guess. That's the new term that they're giving you for proteins coming from insects, flies, mealworms, etc. That's the new key phrase, micro livestock. So you got to think about, what's our diet going to look like as we move through this. All right, so we're going to enjoy the vestiges of the last of a functional society before we come into the breakdown phase, which itself shall end at some point, and then we'll come back into the new bull run phase. Now you have to look at this. Strauss and Howe did a great job. The fourth turning every 80 years. We are definitely at the end of the decline phase. It's going to run its course for a few years, and then we're going to come back into like the rebuilding phase. Okay, in a natural world, cool. But in an artificial world, with intermittent fasting, seed oils, alternative proteins, and synthetic nutrients, not cool. You need foods to be able to make your brains function, unless these types of things turn off your brain so you don't function, but you still stay alive enough to take orders but not question them. To do tasks without doing research. But that's what the entire school system was about anyway. You know, it was never about teaching you how to create wealth or start your own companies or, you know, side hustle for different things. It was always about, you learn a task for a specific company, usually Fortune 500. Your whole reputation was based on what kind of scores you got, what kind of company you're working for. I'm working for Goldman Sachs. You know, that's what the rat race was all the way through the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It was always about, they just trained you to plug you as a battery into that position of accountant, sourcing agent, whatever. Stockbroker, screw you in, burn you out. Oh, put in a new light bulb. That's what schooling was all about. Okay, but we had pretty clean foods. I mean, comparatively to where we're going, that was like nearly organic in the 80s and 90s compared to what our diets will look like with synthetic. I'll say it again. I'll read the list here. Synthetic nutrients, micro livestock, i.e. insects, alternative proteins, which are the lab-grown meats, intermittent fasting, where they were required you to eat 40% less food by 2030. So they might call it intermittent fasting, but I would call it forced rationing and getting you to the point of cognitive decline as your daily waking state. You can talk about prisoners of war all day long. That's kind of where you're going with that kind of amount of food. And then the seed oils like canola, these sort of things, soy reduces your testosterone, adds a bunch of inflammation, etc. So imagine if that's just the basic waking state of a human, to put them into the schooling system, which teaches them to be a light bulb plugged into the office space. Now, luckily, there are still some creative sides of things where creativity, problem solving is still part of, versus, you know, the old relentless press the button, press the button, press the button. I mean, I wonder what the joy was of an auto worker or manufacturer in some kind of whatever plant in the 1950s. After coming back from World War II, you know, industry really kicked off in America, and they needed a lot of people to do that super repetitive task because they didn't have robots yet. Or did they? Just like you mentioned, maybe they had the AI, but they didn't have the a tech to roll it out. Maybe they found it in a cave after the last reset in a cultural layer. Whoa, look what we found. The cube. We don't know how to use it yet, but it looks interesting. Same thing, automation, robotics, this sort of thing is the future. That's what I'm talking about, the creatives, smart minds and that stuff. But think about an auto worker, auto manufacturer in 1950, pressing something and then moving like a fender over to the next line where the next person took it by their hand and then moved it to the next place. Food was really clean right then. And they call it the Great Generation because they wouldn't take anything from anybody. Can you imagine if all of a sudden, and another thing about a time machine, can you imagine if this agenda dropped back into like 1954, 1955, and the whole entire society just dropped on top, but overlayered on top of that? Greatest generation back then in the 50s, there'd be some fireworks for about 2 minutes and then it'd be finished. But you can see the time machine moving in different directions to take a whole society and drop it into a time era, which would clash the resonance vibration, would just shatter everything. It couldn't hold state. But now we're moving into a time where the resonance field is going to be very different across our world. And what they're going to put in the body to just make a human barely functional and then run it through that same indoctrination system called schooling is even more bizarre and really just, difficult to think about. If you haven't gotten the message yet that you're going to need to grow your own foods to stay healthy through this time and also even have food, I'm sorry if you haven't gotten that yet. I'm glad you're listening to Ransom and myself tonight because we can always, learn something new. Try to improve our skills. Because that oil ship taken off of Iran, that is definitely the demonization of your enemies before you invade them or try to. They always use the same MO. Wherever the U.S. had gone into to strike first, what was it? Imperial leader bad, dictator, yeah, that's the label they like to put on people. Bad, look how bad they are, look at the bad things they did. Oh, we have to go in to help, we're spreading and we're the best on the block, so everybody got to live like us, whatever. But the whole thing came first, demonization, and then at that point, then they went in for the invasion because they got everybody whipped up into a fervor. Oh, these people are terrible, they're horrible, you can't, All right? So this just is, for me, one step closer to a greater war because by all accounts of everything I've read since 1900 about how wars start, how things are progressed, and how they can get populations easily manipulated behind protecting the nation, nationalism, blah, blah, blah. Taking the oil ship or blaming it directly on Iran. Now, see, I'm reading a fair few news stories. I encourage you all go to Al Jazeera also. And, that site might be illegal to visit once this whatever technocratic bill comes in. If you use a VPN to access Al Jazeera, that might be illegal. Or if you're going to use a VPN to access RT news, Russian television news, that will be deemed illegal also, for sure. But the articles over on RT are spelling a slightly different story. Same Iranian taking the tanker. Don't get me wrong, they did that. But their versions of the news where there was that vessel collided with an Iranian vessel in the water and then tried to hit and run. And then they intercepted it. Because, when vessels collide, they're supposed to stop. Just like in an auto accident, you're supposed to stop. By the time you made it 4 or 5 miles down the road after you had an accident, pretty sure you hit and run. This was the same thing. It hit and it just continued on and tried to get deeper into shipping lanes, deeper into international shipping lanes away from. So whatever happened, that pursuit was taken and the boat apprehended. It was a hit and run at sea. Now, again, is that on purpose? Because you've got to look at the string of events here. If you were going to build a narrative, see, so far you can't, we really can't, we haven't really done much of the Iranians. They had the nuclear thing, some money, human rights things. Okay, they just have circulated that for, at least for me, since like the 1980s, 90s, 2000, 2010, 2000, about 40 years of that same rhetoric of why they're bad. But now it needs to be something different, because I really think they are going to start to move on some things. Because again, the outcome has to be a world that is without resources or access to them. So you will absolutely accept the new system to get access to those resources once again. And in real time, whether it be the real world, I mean, you're right, Ransom. Like, we could actually be seeing, and what we're witnessing is pure CGI, but, you know, on the other side of the planet, they're just sitting there on the beach laughing at the news they're releasing. That's why I'm glad some people that I actually know, that people actually physically know the people, are running around the planet and, you know, gathering information and stories. So, brings me back to a few new accounts now of Walmart's closing. You know what I thought when I read that list to you about Walmart closing? I was wondering about FEMA. Remember how that had made the rounds there for a while? Tunnels, staging bases, XYZ, you know? So I'm wondering with the closure of Walmart, if this is really coming to fruition of things that were out in the spaces of fringe dwellers that kind of lost some traction are actually the real deal coming back. And maybe you should skip breakfast, Ransom, to save money in the new world. What do you think?
I think I've been skipping breakfast for 45 years because it was this world already. I already know how to do rations. That's why I feel bad for people. I've been rationing my whole life there, just the way it was. You know, I often wonder, I know there's a story behind why you picked 2030, but that's the number that most likely comes up. So even if you weren't, like, say you didn't listen to us at all, if you went and you typed in food shortages 2030 or less farming by 2030, I forgot which show it was. A couple of shows back, I was talking about this program or this conference that they had in Europe in the 1960s that was talking about how they needed to reduce farming by 2030 and that they would slowly do that. And then, like, so if you just type into Google that idea, less farming by 2030, you will see millions of articles, 29 million results. Now, I don't know how all good they are, but let's just start reading some of what they're saying here. Climate change will lower farm belt yields as soon as blah, blah, blah. So climate change will lower farm belt yields as soon as 2030. And then down here, by 2030, crop yield failures will be 4.5 times higher. By 2050, it's a likelihood shoots up to 25 times the current rates. And you can just find endless articles where people have been writing for the last 20 to 40 years about how they're going to shut down farming by the year 2030. So, like, here's another one: USDA agricultural projections for 2030. They're saying that everything will be expensive, it'll be less, people will be going under as far as business, and then back to the climate change impact. And they all use this number, 2030, 2030. You just see it over and over again. It's the date that they have. And you remember they had a whole thing called Agenda 2030, right? So they told us all of this stuff, and they continue to tell us. So right in your face, they're basically telling you that the world's production of food is going to collapse by design, it seems like. I mean, if you're going to be writing about it for that long, it seems like there might be a plan. Now, I'm surprised you brought up that thing about Walmart, because that was one of the very first topics the internet started attacking and censoring. But it is funny that the same companies, a lot of people don't realize Walmart's like, I don't know what they are now, but the time I looked it up, they were like the third biggest Navy and shipping entity in the world. And that included the military. So there was like the United States, Russia, Walmart, you know what I mean? Because they had so many cargo ships, so many containers, that they could literally probably ship in a whole war force onto a dock of a country without anyone raising an eyebrow until it was already there. Now that's, science fiction, but I'm just saying they have those capabilities. Walmart is a monster. So the idea that they're going to reduce their workforce and go all the way over after these years of destroying American production, and then change over to a mostly automated system that's a robotic just-in-time system like the Japanese system, but it's robotic. It's AI driven. And people always ask the same question to me, but if they reduce the population, what do they need all the robots for? Well, if you look at how many robots it takes to replace so many people, you would realize it's not that many robots. And if they have a plan, like the Georgia Guidestone said, about reducing the population down to about 500 million people, you could see that 500 million people or so could be easily managed with high-tech AI systems, robotic, everything. There's really no purpose for the people, I guess, is what people are getting at. Except for those purposes that we've talked about before. There's only one source for an actual quantum computer that we know of that's a real one, an organic one that's grown. And once you kind of control that and have everybody hive mind together, you have the computing power of an entire civilization, or at least 500 million people. And people would ask, well, why don't they leave 8 billion people? Because they don't want to share the planet with you. They have bloodlines that they think that they're important, that they're, the right to rule is a phrase that goes back into antiquity about people having the right to rule. Now, these people believe they own the earth, and they're not like other people that realize, well, I can't take none of this stuff with me. I mean, I got a lot of stuff, but you can't take it into the afterlife. But they don't think that way. They make legacies of children, grandchildren, and they're all on this giant plan. And we can see it. And that plan includes, for some reason, letting the population get very big and then culling it back down to a more manageable thing. And it just seems like this time it's human beings that are doing it instead of some kind of natural event. But because we know that they're smart people and they know these cycles, and that's why they have specific years like 2030 and 2050 and 2025 to pay attention to, then you realize that they know those natural cycles too. They have long records going back into antiquity. We've talked about this many times. You can pick a culture if they're making artwork or statues or astronomy stuff, right? They understood the precession of the equinox. That means that they understood 52,000 years. I know that's hard for people to wrap their mind around, but that's 52,000 years at least of cycles that they've been paying attention to. So if they kind of know when the cycle's coming, they can now use their AI to help plan, just like people are using it today to help them do their work. Well, the elites are doing that same thing. They're coming up with numbers. They're coming up with strategies. They're coming up with plans to reduce everything down, just like they've been talking about, at least since 1960, that in my research, I could figure out, where they've already had a plan to reduce farming around the world, reduce the amount of food that can be produced commercially and privately. This is the plan. So you got to ask yourself, why would they have that plan? Why are they wanting to turn off the power? Why are they wanting people to eat bugs? I mean, you have to ask yourself that eventually. And then you have to come to some kind of hypothesis or theory that fits the facts of the time you live in. And that fact is that they're resetting, according to their own words. They want to reduce the population, according to their own words. And the people left, they want to be up in your body, in under your skin, and control not only your genetics, but what you're thinking, where you go, what you choose, what you eat, and eventually your lifespan. I mean, let's face it, that's what it's all about. And who knows what their plans are behind that, because they haven't really leaked that to us other than through Hollywood movies. And then, like I've said many times, anything that's ever happened for real, there's a movie or a show that talks about that. So whenever you get into an intellectual conversation with somebody that may be ignorant to the facts of the technological advancements of the world, they look at you with this glazed look because they think you're stupid. They think you're, fanciful or living in fiction. Meanwhile, they live in fiction. And everything about our civilization now is fake. But to tell them that, they can't accept that, because that would mean that they were victims to that system, and they don't want to admit that. And unfortunately, all these people, if anything happens, and I'm going to say if, because I'm not Nostradamus, so I don't know that the world's going to end or none of that stuff. But all indications are pointing to a man-made collapse of civilization in order to repeat it. Now, I listen to a lot of different people that theorize about stuff, and a lot of cycles come up. And the fact is that we're in the spot in the solar activity where empires end. I'm sure you can ask many people that are into this topic. So we're kind of at that point where empires end. But guess what? If you study history, you know that right after an empire ends, a new, totally different empire begins. And that's what's happening right now. This new empire, and I wanted to get back to what I said before, that I think the elites have pushed themselves into a corner, because now the future of their transhumanist plans on this earth and the way that they want to track everybody depends on China and their rare earth elements and the production of microchips and the furtherment of technological advance, period. So either we're going to have to beat China at a war, or we're going to have to befriend China and combine it into one system. And I put to you, it's the latter.
Yeah. Again, you're hitting it on the head. It has to go to a certain level to bring in a new system. Because think about something that you might own before you bring a new one in. Now, most times it's going to have to completely break, unless it with clothing, like you mentioned there. Like, how often would you change your, computer mouse just because maybe your hand hurts? Okay, that's a reason. But most people would change it because it's completely broken and it doesn't work. Now, you could change systems or change a mouse if your hand starts to hurt. And we're starting to see that right now, because you might get carpal tunnel or some, fingers that are getting sores. You're scrolling all day and clicking a thing off the mouse. Okay, you would change because of those reasons. That's kind of where we sit right this second. But once the mouse completely stops functioning, has no connectivity, you change the battery, you shaking it, you smacked it a few times and it still doesn't work, you double check your computer, doesn't work, you're going to have to replace that. Okay, you might have to go back to using your fingers on a the old way, scrolling with your fingers over the keyboard there, which would take forever. Or you can get a mouse. So again, you only go to something, you'll live with something for a minute. Like taking a step back in technology, it's still doable, although it's way slower, way clunkier, takes way more time. You have to have some better level of precision to use it because it's not all automated. But eventually, after you get the new computer mouse, you'll finally be able to get back up and move forward with your work. And it's like that with everything, from the collapse we're witnessing right now to just the way that you might change out something in your home that doesn't work correctly. It's got to break and not be functional before you'll get a new one, or before you would accept a new one. Because what if I come up and yours is totally fine? I said, hey, use this new one. You'd be like, nah, this one's cool. Oh, that one's just a little weird. There's something on the side. It clicked. I don't know. You just like, nah, this one works. I'll wait till the battery runs out and maybe I'll use that other one. Thanks, maybe. Like, nobody's going to go directly to an alternative without being forced to go to an alternative. That's just not the way the human mind works. The comfort zone is programmed in the DNA. If you notice through history, those that had the most stable climate environments and the stable, without being attacked by Bengal tigers and whatever else, stability was life. Now, in today's world, we want excitement because it's too stable, it'd be too boring. But back then, you're fighting off Bengal tigers every night. You got, all kind of amoebas and giant insects and things rolling in on you. The last thing you want is adventure, because you're living in an adventure movie. You just want stability, chilled out. We want to grow food. Imagine, every other year you had a famine in your society because nobody could grow food or forage food or find food. You would just be super stoked to chill and just have stable crop growing. Yeah, hey, we'll set up our place here. It's all good. We got food every year. We got security every year. I'm not leaving this place for a minute here. Stability is the way that we have survived all those things that Ransom talked about. We have these giant volcanic eruptions that we can't even fathom. 535 AD, 536 AD, multiple volcanoes going off. But there's been episodes in history where, like I said, I was referring to Lake Toba eruption. Only 70,000 years ago, no less. Apparently, it was the largest eruption outside of something you consider like a super volcano, because itself is a super volcano, Lake Toba. So you hear about Yellowstone eruptions. Well, you had one 70,000 years ago, but it was in Indonesia on Sumatra Island. It really wrapped the entire planet in cloud for 10 years. Now imagine we've been through that and we came back and survived. Now after that, you would definitely want stability in the hardwiring in the brain of being stable, being well fed. You know, that is the base current. That's why people never want change. Because that's the base layer of human existence, is the stability provides security and a way for you to actually have children, raise those children so they can have other children, and that's called a continuation of the species. Without that, well, you don't have a species. You might be one of those 17-year locusts that pops out, you know? Ants are much more prevalent than 17-year locusts, I'll give them that. But still, they're perpetuated somehow. But just the way we're hardwired, you'd never change the comfort until it's stripped away from you and you have no other choice. Then you'll change just long enough to get you comfortable again. So you got to think, trace it out here. You know, like I said in the beginning of the show, how do we game it out from here? So live action role play, as Rex always likes to say at Leak Project, who I just had a talk with the other day. Fun. It was like a fun interview. So think about that. It needs to come down to the point where people are so uncomfortable that they'll give up anything or do anything to get the comfort back. And the comfort will come back relatively quickly. For those who choose to jump into the new system, your comfort will come back pretty quick. So they can't offer you a new system to say it's going to alleviate everything without actually making something happen of it. Or else you'll just abandon that one completely and be like, none of it works. I'm going somewhere else. I don't believe anything ever again. So they can't really, there's no bait and switch on this. It's all, and then it's something after the system's switched. Because you got to think about human psyche again. If it was that tumultuous, and you offer people a second alternative, and it turned out to be as bad or worse, then the next alternative was, oh, we got this one. Very few people would believe it. At that point, you've lost everything. That's why I don't think there's going to be a nuclear exchange either, because too much would be lost, and people would just give up living. Like, they're never going to take the system down to zero everywhere in the world at the exact same time. It's going to go down in pockets that are firewalled off from the rest of the planet and firewalled off from the banking system. And it looks like firewalled off from the internet with this new TikTok bill, or whatever the final name of it was. I forget. Where you use a VPN to access news from other countries, and that's illegal. Well, what's going on in the other countries that we're not allowed to see? That's no different than China. Like, what's really, are we on the other side of the ice wall, should be the question. So Ransom, I could ask you, game it out from here. We're going to use food as your preferred choice to make it so bad that food, when they don't eat, it'll become so expensive that I don't care really what kind of job you have. The food will be so run away with inflation that very few, if any, will be able to afford it, which will leave the luxury of growing your own. So take us down that route of thought there. We're not going into hyperinflation because we're hyperinflating on purpose because of the dollar. It's just there's so little food for a 1 year period or perceived shortage that prices are 10x, 20x, 50x higher, which is sort of a hyperinflation, but maybe not everything hyperinflates. You know, your furniture will stay the same price, but the food you eat to keep you alive every day is going to hyperinflate. So there might be, you know, again, pinpointed hyperinflation in certain commodities or aspects of life, but then other things will stay the same. So then you can't blame hyperinflation. No, there's no hyperinflation. That desk study chair remained the same exact price, only rose 5%. So there's no such thing as hyperinflation. Now your food's 50x and you can't afford it. Then what happens? So game it out. Use the food as the trigger.
I kind of think it'll be like the toilet paper thing. Like I said, like you said, it'll be on certain products. But what they're going to do is they're going to phase out all the nutritional and good food that's in there, and they're already doing that. I could attest to that to my local grocery stores. You can barely find anything that's so-called organic in the first place, and we all know even that stuff has its issues. But that stuff's disappearing, which is leaving the other food, which I think it's not going to be like a super panic because they realize there's no food, because there's going to be all the food like stuff still in the store, like chips and cereals and stuff like that. But the prices are going to keep going up because the materials to make said junk foods are in limited supply and are continuing to become in limited supply. But they'll just keep distracting people with the food like stuffs until they realize that, there really is no food. And then people are going to start being concerned when you can't get vegetables and you can't get, grains or breads. All of that stuff is going to skyrocket in price. It already is. If you could just go back like a couple of years and go to the store, and you were already thinking that, I'm sure anybody that's listening was already thinking, this costs so much, I can't believe prices are like this, but they got used to it over a couple of years. And then they realized that was the new cheap price. And then, and a few years later, well, it got hiked again. You get used to that. And that's what they're doing. They're doing that until it seems like there's a specific kind of plan that loops all this together in the way that they're finding out exactly how much people make. So how much disposable income they have, and then they shove all of these products, and you know how everything is a fee, and then they'll get them on the auto draft where you're paying it. So they're watching their TV and they're doing these other things, and it's all draining their account. And then when it comes time to go buy food, where they've always been used to that little amount left over after their disposable income bills every month, they go to the grocery store and they realize that the money they have just ain't going that far. And then they start to panic. And they're going to start reducing in some of those disposable incomes at first. And you're going to start seeing more and more companies that have to do with nothing, i.e. the media companies, failing, and which we're already seeing that because people are no longer listening to them. And also, the media companies and stuff are trying to hijack you. So when people realize, hey, I'd rather buy a loaf of bread for $7-8 than pay my Netflix bill, that's when people are going to start getting mad, because I've always said this, and it's been true always. Americans, as long as they got 31 flavors of ice cream and 200 cable channels, they really just aren't going to pay attention to nothing. But that all changes when they don't have the money to pay those bills anymore, because they're forced to choose between medicine, food, and entertainment. And then they're going to realize entertainment ain't worth the dollar that you pay for it. I think that'll be the catalyst here, is you're going to see inflation, and to a point, not let this totally run away, but to the point that everybody gets it, that everything costs too much. And that's going to happen right about this presidential election. Just like always, all of the people invest in the new things and they sell off right after. So there's always that little bump in the economy right before the presidential, thing, where people bought up all of the stocks that they knew from being inside the system were going to go up, and all the ones that were going to fail. So there's probably going to be a severe financial crisis right about the time of the presidential election. That's what I'm going to say. That's what they're going to be debating. And while you're not paying attention, all the food and gas and the power prices are going to continue to skyrocket.
So what's the time frame on that? You mentioned before the election, but that's a long way before the election. We got to go, a year and a half more? Yeah, a year and a half until that happens. So, in the time frame, what are you looking at here, do we think? I mean, it's not all going to happen. See, it has to be crashed and sort of, straggling along the bottom so somebody can offer a solution. I have a lot of people, a lot of information. I can't verify it, but a lot of stories and a lot of people are pointing to June as being something, and a lot of people are pointing to May as being something significant also. So, Ransom, what do you think? Give me the time frame out on this thing. Give me the time frame between now and like October, November 2024. What are we looking at in terms of down and out, up and down?
I think by August, people are going to start to realize that they don't have the money to, survive the way that they're used to. And that's when they'll start panicking. And then, we always have the October surprise. So there'll be some kind of world event, God knows what it is, that's going to happen that everybody will pay attention to. I mean, it's like a yearly thing now, right? And then not only that, just this summer, watch, people are going to realize how broke they are when the gas prices and the food prices skyrocket. And I picture that this summer is going to be rough as far as civilization goes. More protests, more destruction of the outlets of the. That seems like what we're in the phase of. That is where the stores are literally being attacked, which gives them further reason to cut back on providing products to people, which is mostly food. That's what we're talking about. So where are you going to go shopping if you burn down the Walmart in your neighborhood because somebody on TV talked you into it? You know what I'm saying?
That was the new housing facility in Staging Post. It wasn't a Walmart. It's being converted. So imagine every Walmart, even if you think you're way, way out in the countryside, and then that converts over and suddenly there's a base right there in the middle of the countryside. Like, whoa, 3,000 people stationed there, going through the countryside, doing sweeps and whatever. That'd be rough. Walmart? Finish some more stuff. World class. Thanks for listening to DuByne. Ransom, Godwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.